Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome back to Bluebaggers Edge. It is a quick fire preview as it is quite close to game time. I've just run out of absolutely any time to record this, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, there isn't really much more to say apart from kind of what I covered already in the Richmond round one review. But of course, we will go through the ins and outs ever so briefly. So, as you can see here, the big in for us, thankfully, is Charlie is back. Francis Evans goes out after a relatively, I guess, quiet debut from Francis Evans. I will say when he did have the ball in his hand, he actually looked okay. But big query is the fact that he just doesn't get his hands on it enough to really make much of an impact. And that's kind of been the knock on his game, even when he was at Port Adelaide, and even longer than that when he was at Geelong. So again, scratching my head as to why we picked him up. But is what it is. Anyway, good to see Charlie is back. Adds another avenue to goal, hopefully. You would think so, considering that we've had a fair few issues, especially in round one, cropping up yet again in terms of the inability to convert inside 50s to scoring opportunities, which I'll get into in a moment. But Hawthorn, they have returning CJ, Jouth, and Jack Gunston. Out goes Sam Frost and Jack Scrimshaw, who is injured and suspended as well. Let's have a quick look at the, in terms of the lineups. I mean, you can only read so much into this, but going to be a really big matchup between TDK and Lloyd Meek. I think they're quite well matched. They are quite aerobic ruckmen around the ground. I think they can both do a fair bit of damage, but I just think that, we could kind of get a little bit of an edge on Meek in terms of TDK. I think he is a little bit stronger around the ground compared to Meek, but to his credit, that's not with saying that Meek isn't a decent ruckman or, the work that does around the ground isn't impactful. So big watch on that, but that will dictate as to how we fare in the midfielder stakes. Adam Cerra is named in the engine room, and that's good to see because what I'm hearing during the week is the fact that, again, and it made my blood boil, the fact that apparently Cerra was training with the defenders. I don't know how many times Voss needs to see him failing in defence to really get it into his head that is a move that will not work. Tried it 3 games in 2024. He got absolutely smashed, and he doesn't have that defensive mindset to his game. It's not a one-wood. I don't know why we're trying to craft him into a halfback flanker when we don't need him there. We've got Ollie Hollands there who is incredible, played one of his best games in recent times last week against Richmond, one of the few that can hold his head high and just doesn't really make sense again. So if that happens in game, I am going to be calling for Voss's head because that there is just negligent coaching. And again, I've spoken about it last year, about that stubbornness that he has in his game. And it probably, permeates through to the assistant coaches as well because they do have influence to some degree of, the saying of, Cerra might be worth potentially playing off half-back. But I imagine that Tim Clark, the mids coach, won't be too happy if that's the case because you're losing one of your key pillars, one of your key strengths in the engine room, and we can't afford to have any deficiencies in that area considering that we were lacking, especially in the second half last week. Jesse Motlop, I'm very surprised that he's kept his spot. And again, I think it's probably due to circumstance. And it annoys me because the lack of small forwards does mean that he kind of gets a state of execution. Probably would be out of my side if I was choosing the lineups from week to week. But I mean, you could probably say the same thing for Nick Haynes. But I think Haynes, you can kind of give him a little bit of leeway. He is relatively stable in terms of his intercept marking, his ability to replay, all that sort of stuff. So it was an off game for him, and it was kind of like contagious. I think the way that the team struggled under pressure and that they panicked, and that just sort of, again, was almost a contagion. So give him another week, I think, and, I think for the experience that he does hold, it was an off game, so willing to give him another week. Ashton Moyer, again, speaking to Jesse Motlop, I would have brought him in 100%. And outside of that, I think, again, it just comes down to probably structure and holding structure more than anything. Matty Cottrell as well is probably another guy that's probably found himself a little bit lucky to stay in the team. I'll be interested to see what changes are made structurally in game. I mean, Jack Silvani was pushed forward late in the piece, and to his credit, actually was one of our better performing forwards when he was pushed when he was pushed up there, kicking a goal or two, and taking some really strong grabs. But again, the big area that we need to improve in is our inside 50 entries. And there was a really nice article, if you haven't seen it, check it out, that was written on the AFL website by Riley Beveridge, who's a fellow Carlton man and knows the side quite intimately, but went through the stats, talking about in terms of our lack of converting to scoring shots when it was weighed up alongside the number of inside 50s that we're having. We were ranked 17 on the weekend against Richmond. We had 65 inside 50s, which was ranked second out of the 18 teams. But the goals per inside 50 conversions were 14%, which was ranked second last, 17th. So that just really does paint the picture there in terms of how bad our forward 50 entries are. I just hope with Charlie there, it provides another dynamic there for them to potentially go back to the basics of what they were working on across the preseason, and hopefully they were working on basics across the preseason when it comes to leading patterns and everything else that I'm referring to there, because it's just very frustrating to see, especially when you have a look alongside the inside 50s and the total scoring opportunities that were taken by the likes of Gold Coast and Collingwood, which had very similar inside 50s to us. I'll just bring it up on screen here so you can see. So Gold Coast had 67 inside 50s, 2 more than us, and converted that to 36 scoring shots. And of course, we only had 24, which does paint the picture there. And Collingwood as well, they had the equal most inside 50s alongside us, and they had 31 scoring shots, and both kicking 136 points, both Gold Coast and Collingwood. It really does put us to shame in terms of our inability to score, which just, again, I don't understand how or why, because we have such a talented duo up there. When they are both playing together, we do struggle again with Harry and Charlie. And, Kemp did well enough at various stages, but, he's a third tier tall. And hopefully that means that Kempy can come out of his shell a little bit more with Charlie and Harry in the side. And, didn't really get much of an opportunity last season when he was pushed forward because of the fact that both Harry and Charlie at various stages were injured. But again, as you can see here, the retention rate for us when we do kick the ball inside 50, that is another big part of our game that we're lacking. As soon as we get it in, we kick to a massive pack, and the defense of the opposition are just so easily, slingshotting the ball back the other end. And that's how we get really hurt on turnovers and transition. And I went through that in the review episode for round 1 against Richmond, just to highlight that. But again, another area we need to work on. And then the same thing, again, it's deja vu, exits coming out of defensive 50. So really there isn't much more to say apart from that. We want a spirited effort more than anything. Past few encounters against Hawthorn haven't been the best. As we know full well, we lost to them by 74 points last year. It was 5-8-38 to 16-16, 112, and their inefficiency in front of goal there probably saved the margin to be a little bit smaller than what it should have been in reality. But Hawthorn are a really good team. They move the ball very quickly, and I think, when we go into our shell, that's when we lose all the fast ball movement. And I think fast ball movement for us is our strength. It just comes down to confidence and just having, confidence not only in yourself, but also your teammate as well. And yeah, it's just stupid stuff, basic skill errors, running off your man when you shouldn't to apply pressure to the ball carrier when there's another 2 Carlton players doing the same thing, leaves free opposition players everywhere. And you just hope they've tightened things up at the very least. So even prior to that, we were able to beat Hawthorn 17-10, 112 to 7-10, 52. Now that is a scoreline we'd love to see tonight. And then even prior to that, we beat Hawthorn by the 1 point. Of course, I think that was the game where they came back very eerily similar to last week's game against Richmond, where we were up by a fair bit and they came back and somehow we clawed on and got the victory. But that's kind of where we're at. In terms of other key matchups, just quickly, again, we'll try and keep this to around about 10 minutes record time. But yeah, it's, you could probably see the likes of Gunston kicking goals against us, which he always does somehow. Nick Watson could be a little bit of a pest as well. Jack Ginnivan as well. And, they've just got contributors across the park there. Massimo D'Ambrosio, CJ adds a bit of speed and dynamic off their half-back line. and they've got guys across the park, which they're not really big names. I mean, you've got the likes of Sicily, and that's about it. Like Will Day, who's come on. I do imagine that there will be a bit of a run with roll, or at least some sort of pressure that is applied to Will Day, considering that he has been tagged in the previous 2 games to great effect. I think he's that sort of player that kind of struggles with a little bit of tag, but hopefully we don't just concentrate solely on one player, because that's kind of where we just find ourselves come undone, I think, a little bit. We need to think broader than that defensively, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Georgie Hewitt apply a little bit of defensive pressure to him, at least at stoppages, and then run off him, and I wouldn't mind that. But yep, as I said, goes back to basics. If we can do that, I mean, just look at what Richmond applied to us last week. Basic pressure. That's virtually all it did. Off the back of that, they were able to get 9 goals on turnover. If we can do that, if Richmond can do that, who are virtually a young, virtually an under-18s team for majority of their team, if they can do that, if they can apply that same sort of pressure that we can sort of replicate, that's all you can ask for. And with that, hopefully confidence builds, skill set is maintained, and doesn't erode. And hopefully we can get away with the victory. But I will admit, I'm not confident at all. Not confident at all. I think the way that we're being played, structurally, same issues, no plan B, so on and so forth. So for the interest of keeping this video relatively short, we will end things there, of course. But of course, thank you as always for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed as yet, feel free to do so. Really do appreciate the support, of course. And hopefully when I am back chatting with you, it is chatting about a victory over the Hawks. So that is it, ladies and gents. Thanks as always for tuning in. Let us know, as always, your comments down below, your thoughts, expectations. What are you hoping that we can implement, whether it be structurally, game plan, matchup-wise, whatever. I'm pretty basic at the moment. I hope they can go back to basics. You got to start from the ground up, because that's virtually what we need to do to build our confidence back to where it needs to be. So we'll see how things unfold at the MCG tonight, and hopefully it is a cracking game at the very least, and we'll catch you in the next one. Go Baggers.